I'm happy to join with you in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of fight for freedom in history of Brazil. In the last constitution, great congressmen stated and signed that all kinds of censorship was prohibited. This freedom of speech came as a great beacon light of hope for a real democracy, which had banished any fear of injustice concerning democratic rights. It came as a joyous daybreak in the end of long days of uncertainty. But some years later, we are not free anymore. Some years later, the life of millions of Brazilians has been put sadly under control and censorship by those who politically oriented have achieved strategic places in the legislative and judiciary courts. Some years later, part of society who support the conservative right party lives on the risk of being criminalized and arrested just for making use of their right of thinking and speaking against what some say is right saying. Some years later, part of the nation is watched over by ministers of law who give personal interpretation of what constitution should be. I'm happy to join with you in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of fight for freedom in history of Brazil. In the last constitution, great congressmen stated and signed that all kinds of censorship was prohibited. This freedom of speech came as a great beacon light of hope for a real democracy, which had banished any fear of injustice concerning democratic rights in the end of long days of uncertainty. But some years later, we are not free anymore. Some years later, the life of millions of Brazilians has been put sadly under control and censorship by those who politically oriented have achieved strategic places in the legislative and judiciary courts. Some years later, part of society who support the conservative right party lives on the risk of being criminalized and arrested just for making use of their right of thinking and speaking against what some say is right saying. Some years later, part of the nation is watched over by ministers of law who give personal interpretation of what constitution should be. So we have come to front of military headquarters to show the world our shameful condition. These manifestations are to have guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient good values in most of those who were elected by this nation. So we have come to a point that we demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Now is the time to make the real and make it real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of censorship to the sunlit path of real democracy justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of communist bullshit risk to the solid rock of the free prosperity. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all the God's children based on equal rights for every citizen. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in Brazil until legitimate elections are granted under no doubt. The explosion of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. And we have definitely banished the threat of communism. And as we walk, we make the pledge that we shall march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of freedom, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as we fear our words might disappoint some man in position to silence us or convict us just for expressing our opinions. We cannot be satisfied as long as elections are some issue to only be given a result without being able to audit or think it might be wrong. No, we are not satisfied. And we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It's a dream deeply rooted in the good man's heart. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of democracy, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day we will get to the end of the heat of oppression, will be transformed into ordinations of freedom and justice. I have a dream that all of this nation's children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the ideology and treated differently if they are on the right wing of politics. I have a dream today. This is our hope. This is the faith that we go back to fair democracy. With the faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go out to the streets together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we'll be free one day. This will be the day when all the God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning, the Liberty Song, the Liberty Anthem. And if Brazil is to be a great nation, this must become true, to let freedom ring from the north to the south of Brazil. Let freedom ring from Oiapoque to Chuí. And when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when finally get rid of the imminent danger of communism, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children will be able to join hands and sing in the words of glory. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, will be free at last.